I'm Logan T Sibrel. I'm originally from a town called Santa Claus, Indiana, and I'm a painter. I started just as a kid. I was always drawing and painting, just kind of as a pastime. And I think, because of where I grew up, which was quite rural and, not necessarily a lot to do, I just ended up kind of being in nature all the time or drawing, and that was kind of my pastime. And then, over the years, it's like you do that long enough, you kind of like put in the hours and kind of started thinking like, oh, maybe this could be like my job kind of thing. I mean, I started probably with like crayons, but pretty quickly, I mean, as a kid, how kids want like toys or any of these kind of things, it was always also the kind of thing like my parents would be like, oh, you don't need that, you don't need that. But if I asked for art materials, I always said yes. So there was probably something in that too, just like wanting to buy something. But yeah, so I started kind of like with what every kid starts with, and then I think when I turned 13, I got kind of my first like proper paint, like more professional paint set. So that's really when like the painting became a thing. I mean, it's been so long that I don't think I know how to do anything else. But also, I mean, it's still kind of how I don't know, it's sort of how, you take information in and it's kind of, I need a few steps further to process things, I think. And so it's always kind of been how I'll take in like music or books or have a conversation with somebody, and then something will stick and I need kind of an extra step almost. So it is kind of how I process things in a way. Obviously there were like always like drawing competitions and stuff in my school. So that was kind of the first thing where it was like, oh, this is a thing, like I can actually do this. Or like I noticed some, it sounds immodest, but like some kind of gulf between like me and the other kids. And I was like, okay, this is like a skill that I could maybe hone. But I think, I don't know. I mean, I guess in high school, the art teachers at my school were actually like pretty good. And at a certain point, I remember one teacher specifically was kind of like, just let me design my own courses, basically. He's like, whatever, I'm not gonna make you copy like something from a magazine like everybody else. So I would kind of like design projects. And so I guess a lot of sort of the validation I would get from older people was encouraging, and then, you get the ball rolling and get in college and stuff, and then the longer you do it, the more, as you get reinforcement, it's like, okay, this is maybe viable. Yeah, so I got my undergraduate degree at Indiana University in Bloomington, and I was there 2005 to 2009. And the painting program there is quite formal. So, you're like painting from models, painting like setup, still lifes, and this kind of thing. And you can get a general arts degree there, but there's also like the BFA program, which is like, you have to sort of apply separately after you've done, certain foundational things. And so my second year of college, I applied for that and got in, and that was really like, it was an amazing program. Like, I still think it was great, and I would recommend that any young student try to mimic as much of that situation as possible. Just because I think it's really, when people are younger, I think you kind of want to do this rebellious thing maybe, or like do something crazy, but you don't know really why or like what you're rebelling against. So I think while at the time that foundational stuff was kind of frustrating and I just wanted to like get out of the gate and start doing something bigger, I do really value like those formal skills that I picked up. And the program was also like, I don't know, you got a huge studio, you got to sit in on all like the master's students' critiques and stuff, so they treated you quite seriously. So that was a good experience, and then I kind of started thinking I wanted to go to grad school and started imagining, where I would go for that or where I wanted to apply. And I knew that I wanted to be either in New York or somewhere in Europe, so I only applied based on the location, basically. And then I got into a few places, but Parsons offered a scholarship, so that was kind of financially necessary. And then I moved to New York for grad school in 2009, and went to that school, which was like very conceptual and kind of the total opposite of what I had previously learned. So it was, educationally, it was kind of an interesting thing because I was always kind of craving the inverse of whatever the situation was, which I think, it's nice to be in a situation where you have like a frustration to kind of like butt your head up against a little bit. It's like pretty, it keeps you moving, I think, in a way. So. I did feel lucky being here because I had some kind of like very old friends who also moved kind of around the same time. And it's sort of that classic thing of like getting out of school, and they're like, it's gonna get very quiet because you're used to these people coming to your studio, and you quickly realize they were coming because they were paid to come. And so it was a kind of difficult adjustment for a while, like trying, you want to get people into your studio and as many eyeballs on it as possible. And it was kind of like, then too was sort of, I think, very early days of like, these usual ways that people do things now, like through Instagram and things. It's like the social media of it all wasn't really a thing yet. So I mean, I would just take kind of like absolutely any show that was offered to me, like regardless of, I tried not to be like too snobby about it. But it is kind of a thing, like right out of school, I think, everyone's kind of scrambling, and some people do get shows and stuff, but I think those few years are crucial, where if you kind of hang on, it's like there is a pretty steep drop off, so like you do end up kind of being one of a handful of people left after a while. But yeah, there were many years of less than desirable jobs that I had to do to like make ends meet and stuff. And I did some like illustration and worked for like fashion illustration stuff and really scrambled to piece it together. I think the goalpost is always shifting. For a very long time, I mean, the only goal, which seemed very insurmountable, was to be painting full time and have that be the only gig. So, I mean, I've been only painting now for, I think, 5 years. And so then that becomes like, okay, what's the goal now, kind of thing. And I don't know, it's tricky because I do think that I'm a very like regimented, like disciplined person. So I think just in like my kind of studio day to day, I'm always kind of thinking of like, okay, how do we push this further? So like on a painting to painting basis, I'm kind of, just like trying to keep myself from being bored and like staying engaged and this kind of thing, which maybe doesn't sound like a big goal, but it is, you do something for enough years and it is kind of like, it's hard to try and avoid your, things that can be a crutch in your work. Or so I think a big goal is always to just kind of like keep mixing it up as much as I can. Lately I've been thinking also of, I had previously taught some painting courses, and I do think like eventually it would be kind of a goal to get back into that somehow, even if it's like a day a week, just because when you're in the studio all the time, it's like, oh, I have not spoken to a single person for 48 hours. So it's, I think it would be good to have that kind of conversation, and especially like an intergenerational conversation. I think it's something that I would be interested in doing again. With the work, I almost think of it as like a mixtape logic or something, where it's like, when you're like, if you're constructing like a mixtape for someone or something, like not every track has to be like a banger. It's like, it has to work in concert, and it's like, maybe there's one track that's like not as good, but it's like it's the nice kind of bridge to the next one. So I've kind of always used that as a sort of like driving principle. And so I do think, to me, like obviously I want them to work individually, but I do think they kind of gain the most meaning in concert. And someone actually I admire for like their exhibition strategy is someone like Wolfgang Tillmans, who's kind of goes back and forth. Like a show could have a work from like 1993 and then one from this year or something. So I think it's interesting to kind of mix them up in that way because, you know, just depending on what's side by side, it does make a totally different meaning. And I think on top of that, it's almost like the meaning is like sometimes an insistence on non-meaning in a way, or like that's a sort of undercurrent, or it's like sort of kind of insisting on the thing that I was talking about, where it's like it kind of like meaning is an objective, like these things kind of these pieces only make sense together, sort of thing. You know, I was so worried for a very long time about I'm incapable of kind of like admitting defeat or something in like a very stubborn way, which I think has served me. But I think there were many years when I was like, oh God, is this like, am I delusional? Like, should I be doing this kind of thing? Which I'm glad that I kept doing it. But I think kind of knowing what I know now, it's like really kind of all that it took to do this full time was like a little bit extra, you know, a little bit extra time devoted. And I was working like full-time jobs all the time. So I think if I would have been a little bit less concerned with like, I'm very like Midwestern in this way, like we have to like cover all the bases, be safe, you know, follow the rules kind of thing. And I think if I would have taken a little bit more of a leap sooner, I would have spent less time working jobs I hated, maybe.